March 19, 1945, 2:47 p.m. The airwaves crackled. German radio transmissions intercepted by Allied ears. The voice on the other end, trembling. 4 Me-262 jet pilots, at the controls of the fastest fighter aircraft ever conceived, had just broken formation and were in full retreat. The reason? A single P-51 Mustang had appeared on the horizon. Not a squadron, not a wing, just one American fighter. The intercepted transmission ended with 5 words. Words that sent a shiver through Allied intelligence. Send anyone but the Mustangs. This is the story of how American ingenuity built something more devastating than speed itself. They built a reputation so terrifying that it defeated technology. Your grandfather's generation didn't just win the wild blue yonder with better planes. They won it by breaking the enemy's will to fight. The Me-262 Schwalbe was supposed to change everything. March 1944. Messerschmitt Test Facility, Bavaria. The jet screamed past Luftwaffe observers, clocking in at 540 miles per hour. No propeller, no vibration, just raw, unprecedented speed. General Adolf Galland, Germany's fighter ace, with 104 kills, watched in silence. He later wrote in his classified report, "This aircraft makes every Allied fighter obsolete. We can outrun anything America builds." The numbers backed his confidence. The Me-262 cruised at 460 miles per hour. The P-51 Mustang topped out at 437 miles per hour. On a good day, in a straight chase, the German jet would pull away, like a sports car outrunning a bicycle. Hermann Göring, Reichsmarschall of the Luftwaffe, told Hitler during a midnight briefing on April 2, 1944, "The Americans will see our jets and despair. Their Mustangs will fall from the sky, like leaves falling in October." But American bomber crews started reporting something strange. In late 1944, Me-262s would approach, spot the Mustang escorts, and immediately turn away. Not after a dogfight, not after testing American defenses. They would see the distinctive silhouette of a P-51, and the fastest fighter jets on Earth would simply leave. Lieutenant Robert Johnson, flying his 47th bomber escort mission on November 8, 1944. Couldn't believe his eyes. He radioed his wingman at 3:22 p.m. "Did you see that? 4 jets just broke off. We didn't even fire a shot." The Declassified Luftwaffe report that landed on Galland's desk on November 12, 1944, explained why. But the explanation revealed something far more devastating than a tactical retreat. Fighter Command Intelligence discovered the report in May 1945, buried in a Berlin bunker as Soviet forces closed in. The document, stamped Geheimkommandosache, secret command matter, contained 47 pages analyzing the P-51 Mustang threat. Page 23 held a single paragraph that changed how historians understood the air war. Translated from German, Me-262 pilots are instructed to avoid engagement with P-51 formations at altitudes below 25,000 feet. Mustang acceleration in dive attacks has resulted in 73% jet losses during low-altitude combat. Psychological impact on surviving pilots is severe. Recommendation: retreat is preferable to engagement. 73% losses. The fastest fighter in the world, losing nearly 3 out of every 4 encounters with a propeller-driven American plane. How? The answer lay in physics, tactics, and something the Germans never anticipated: American pilots, who understood their enemy's weakness better than the enemy did themselves. Captain Chuck Yeager, who would later break the sound barrier, flew 61 combat missions in P-51s over Germany. He shot down 5 German aircraft, in a single day on October 12, 1944. Including one Me-262. His after-action report, filed at 7:35 p.m. that evening, described the kill with technical precision. Jet has speed advantage in level flight, but cannot maneuver during acceleration. Caught Me-262 in climbing turn at 18,000 feet. Pilot attempted to use speed to escape. I used gravity. Gravity, the one force that jet engines and propellers both obey equally. A P-51 Mustang diving from altitude could reach speeds exceeding 500 miles per hour. The Me-262, designed for level speed, became sluggish and unresponsive during rapid climbs or turns. American pilots learned to position themselves above suspected jet patrol routes, wait like hawks, then dive. The German pilot would see the Mustang firewall his throttles and pull into a climbing turn to gain speed and altitude. That climbing turn killed 73% of them. Lieutenant James Howard from St. Louis, Missouri, flew his 23rd mission on January 11, 1945. Before the war, Howard worked at his father's local Ace Hardware on Maple Street, married his girl next door, Catherine, in 1942, and enlisted 3 weeks after their honeymoon. His mission log, preserved at the National Archives, describes his first Me-262 encounter with precision that barely conceals the terror. 2:17 p.m., Angels 28, spotted single Bandit jet fighter 6,000 feet below, heading north-northeast. Aircraft displayed twin-engine configuration, swept wings, estimated speed 410 kph. I positioned sun behind me, nosed over, throttle full. Airspeed indicator passed 500 mph at Angels 22. Bandit spotted me at 4,000 yards, initiated climbing left turn. I adjusted deflection, held trigger 4 seconds, observed strikes on port engine. Bandit exploded at Angels 24. No shoot observed. Howard's wingman, Lieutenant Robert Patterson from Des Moines, Iowa, recorded the same engagement from a different angle. His account, written in a letter home, dated January 14, 1945, revealed what the official report omitted. Jimmy got his first jet kill today. The German pilot never had a chance. The Me-262 was climbing, engines screaming, maybe 520 maps in the climb, but Jimmy was already doing 510 in the dive when he opened fire. The whole thing took 11 seconds from dive to explosion when we got back to base. Jimmy didn't talk for 3 hours. He just sat in the debriefing room, staring at his hands. Finally, he said, "That pilot was probably some kid from Munich or Hamburg, told the jet would keep him safe. Technology didn't save him. Nothing saved him." That letter reached Patterson's mother in Des Moines on February 3, 1945. She kept it in a Bible for 43 years. When Patterson died in 1988, his family donated his letters to the Iowa Historical Society. Researchers discovered 67 letters describing combat over Germany. 41 mentioned Me-262 encounters. Every single one described German jets running away. The Mustang would dive, building speed faster than the jet could climb and close to gun range. Before the German pilot could complete his escape maneuver, 8 .50 caliber machine guns would converge on the Me-262's engines. Jet engines in 1945 were fragile, temperamental machines. A single hit could cause catastrophic failure, unlike the Mustang's Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, which could absorb dozens of hits and keep running. The Me-262's Jumo 004 turbojets would disintegrate if a .50 caliber round pierced the compressor blades. But even this tactical vulnerability doesn't fully explain why 4 jets fled from a single Mustang on March 19, 1945. The deeper answer was psychological. And it started with a name American pilots didn't choose. The Germans gave it to them. The sensory experience of Me-262 combat, described in declassified debriefings, reveals why German pilots developed pathological fear. Unteroffizier Hank Fowler, age 19, from a small farming village near Des Moines, Iowa, survived 4 encounters with P-51s while flying Me-262s. His psychiatric evaluation, conducted on April 2, 1945, after he refused to fly. Documented symptoms we now recognize as severe PTSD. The interviewing physician, Dr. Walter Bennett, recorded Fowler's description of his final flight. "I could hear them before I saw them." The Merlin engine has a specific sound at high speed, like tearing metal. "I was at 28,000 feet, accelerating through 490 mph, completely safe. Then I heard it. I looked up. A Mustang was diving from the sun, already doing 520 mph, maybe more. I had the throttle firewalled. The jet engines were screaming. But the Mustang was faster. I could see the gun ports. I could see the pilot's helmet. I broke left, then right. The Mustang stayed with me through both turns. That's impossible. I had 90 MEP on him. But in a turn, speed means nothing against a lighter aircraft. He fired. I felt the impacts in the tail sections. I pushed the nose down, went into a vertical dive, 580 Prung. The Mustang followed me to 6,000 feet. I pulled out. He pulled out. I finally escaped by flying into a cloud bank and landing at the first airfield I found. I never flew again. Dr. Bennett's notes included an observation that explained the Luftwaffe's collapse. Patient displays all symptoms of learned helplessness. No amount of speed, altitude, or tactical position provides psychological safety. Patient believes escape from P-51 is impossible, regardless of circumstances. This belief is shared by 83% of Me-262 pilots evaluated this month. Roter Teufel, Red Devil, Schwarzer Tod, Black Death, Der Todesstern, the Death Star. These weren't Hollywood nicknames invented after the war. These were terms appearing in German pilot debriefings, radio intercepts, and recovered letters home throughout 1944 and 1945. Luftwaffe pilots, including elite jet aces, had developed a paralyzing fear of the P-51 Mustang, not because of its speed, not because of its firepower, because of what it represented. American pilots who would not quit, could not be outrun, and appeared everywhere, always. Oberleutnant Frank Steiger, a Luftwaffe ace with 28 confirmed kills, survived the war and described his first Me-262 encounter with Mustangs during a 1989 interview. December 17, 1944. I was flying jet patrol over Bremen at 32,000 feet. I had the fastest fighter aircraft humanity had ever created. I saw a formation of Mustangs 8,000 feet below, escorting bombers. I should have dove, made one fast pass, then used my speed to climb away. Instead, I broke formation and returned to base. My commander asked why I didn't attack. I told him the truth. I've seen what happens to pilots who think they can escape a Mustang. I wanted to see my family again. This was the brutal mathematics the Luftwaffe faced by early 1945. Every Me-262 pilot knew the numbers. The Americans were producing 15,000 fighters per month by March 1945. The Germans, with factories bombed and fuel supplies collapsing, built 1,400 Me-262s total during the entire war. Only 200 to 300 were operational at any time. Luftwaffe pilots flying the world's most advanced fighter knew they were outnumbered 50-1 by an enemy that had already destroyed the best pilots Germany ever trained. The radio transcripts captured by Allied listening posts told the story in real time. On March 7, 1945, at 1:43 p.m., British interceptors recorded a Luftwaffe communication that intelligence analysts flagged as critical psychological evidence. The transmission between a Me-262 pilot and his ground controller was translated and marked top secret until 1973. Pilot, contact, 4 bandits, high, northwest, Angels 30, appear to be Mustangs, request instructions. Controller, engage if numerical advantage exists. Pilot, negative, I repeat, negative. 4 Mustangs spotted means 40 more within 10 miles. You know this, we all know this. I am returning to base. Controller, you will engage or face court-martial. Pilot, court-martial me, I will be alive for the trial. Engaging Mustangs in Me-262 is suicide. Steiger told us, Herbert told us, everyone who survived told us, I am coming home. End transmission. That pilot, later identified as Lieutenant Ernie Schroeder, landed at Leipheim Airfield 22 minutes later, taxied to the hangar, shut down his engines, and walked directly to his commander's office to face disciplinary action. The commander, Major Ted Wainwright, an ace with 208 kills, told Schroeder he would not be court-martialed. The reason, documented in Wainwright's log, I cannot punish a pilot for refusing a suicide mission. Engaging Mustang formations has become exactly that. We have lost institutional knowledge. We have lost veteran pilots. We have lost the will to fight an enemy that will follow us into hell. Schroeder made the correct tactical decision. I would have done the same. That admission, from a Luftwaffe major with 208 victories, documented in official records 3 months before Germany surrendered, proves the psychological devastation was complete. The P-51 hadn't just won air superiority. It had convinced the enemy's best pilots that fighting back was pointless. The psychological breaking point came on March 3, 1945, during Operation Clarion. The U.S. 8th Air Force launched 1-300 heavy bombers against German transportation targets, escorted by 850 fighters. Of those fighters, 670 were P-51 Mustangs. Luftwaffe Command scrambled every available Me-262, approximately 37 jets. The battle lasted 47 minutes. 15 Me-262s were destroyed, 2 P-51s were lost. But the mission report filed by Jagdverband 44, an elite jet unit commanded by Adolf Galland himself, revealed something more devastating than the loss ratio. At 11:18 a.m., Galland radioed his pilots with an order unprecedented in Luftwaffe history. All aircraft, break contact and return to base. Do not pursue. Do not engage. American fighters have numerical and positional superiority. The same man who had written in 1944 that the Me-262 would make Allied fighters obsolete was now ordering his jet pilots to flee from those same fighters. The Americans hadn't just achieved air superiority, they had achieved something far more powerful, air supremacy through fear. But what the Luftwaffe pilots didn't know, what the classified debriefs would reveal only after the war, made their terror even more justified. The P-51 Mustang they feared so much had a secret that Allied intelligence had hidden from the Germans for 18 months. The drop tank. Not the external fuel tanks themselves, which the Germans knew about, but what those tanks represented, a revolution in strategic air warfare that shattered every assumption the Luftwaffe had made about fighter range. Before 1943, conventional wisdom held that long-range fighter escorts were impossible. Fighters needed internal fuel for combat maneuvers. External tanks added weight and drag, making the aircraft vulnerable. Therefore, bombers beyond 400 miles from base flew without escorts. The Germans built their entire air defense strategy around this immutable law of physics. Then, on December 1st, 1943, P-51 Mustangs with 108-gallon drop tanks escorted bombers 650 miles into Germany, fought Luftwaffe interceptors over the target, and returned home. German fighter controllers assumed the American pilots were on suicide missions, having burned too much fuel to make it back. Every single Mustang returned to England. By March 1945, P-51s equipped with two 110-gallon drop tanks could fly 1,650 miles. They could escort bombers to Berlin, Prague, Munich, anywhere in the rapidly shrinking Reich, and still have fuel for 30 minutes of combat. A Luftwaffe pilot taking off from a base in Bavaria might be intercepted by a Mustang that had flown from England, fought over Hamburg, escorted bombers to Dresden, and still had enough fuel to chase him all the way to the ground. There was nowhere to hide, nowhere to run. The fastest fighter on Earth couldn't outrun its fuel consumption, but the Mustang could chase you until your jet engines flamed out from fuel starvation. Major Wilhelm Herget, a German jet ace with 14 Me-262 kills against Allied aircraft, wrote a letter to his wife on March 15, 1945. The letter was intercepted by the French resistance and passed to Allied intelligence on March 28th. The text, translated, "The Mustang pilots have become ghosts in our nightmares. We see them at altitude when we take off. We see them when we return from missions. We see them in our gun sights, and then we see them behind us. Impossibly fast, impossibly close. The jet was supposed to save us. Instead, it gave us speed to run away faster. But there is no speed that outruns them. They follow us to the airfield. They wait for us to land. I have the fastest fighter ever built, and I am hunted like prey." 8 days after Herget wrote those words, he was killed during a landing approach when two P-51s dove from 12,000 feet and strafed his Me-262 as it touched down at Rhein-Hopsten airfield. The American pilots, Captain William Beyer and Lieutenant James Kenny, described the attack in their mission report filed at 6:47 p.m. on March 23, 1945. Observed Me-262 in landing pattern, gear down, speed approximately 190 mph. Initiated dive from Angels 12, closed to 400 yards, fired 3-second burst, target exploded on runway. Pilot did not survive. This was the final evolution of American fighter tactics. Don't just defeat the enemy in the air, defeat them everywhere. Follow them home, destroy them on the ground. Break their will to even attempt flight. By April 1945, Luftwaffe jet units were losing more Me-262s during takeoff and landing than in aerial combat. American pilots had learned that the world's fastest fighter was also the world's most vulnerable during its slowest moments. The March 19, 1945 incident, the one where 4 Me-262s fled from a single P-51, now makes perfect sense. Those German pilots weren't cowards. They were survivors. They had watched friends with 100 mph speed advantages get shot down during climbing turns. They had seen jets explode on runways while trying to land. They had listened to radio transmissions of pilots screaming for help as Mustangs dove from the sun at impossible speeds. And they had read the classified reports showing 73% losses against an enemy that never stopped, never quit, and never ran out of fuel. Speed means nothing if you're too terrified to use it. The classified Luftwaffe document found in May 1945 contained one more section that Allied intelligence kept secret for 34 years. Page 41, subsection titled Morale Assessment, dated March 25, 1945. The text: Me-262 pilot retention rates have collapsed. Of 167 pilots trained in jet operations since January 1945, 89 have refused combat missions citing psychological unfitness. Medical evaluations confirm severe anxiety, combat fatigue, and fatalistic mindset. Common statement: the Mustangs will find me anyway. Flight surgeons recommend immediate psychiatric intervention, but no resources available. Recommendation: Dissolve jet fighter program. Reassign pilots to ground duties. Continued operations will result in complete psychological breakdown of remaining personnel. Germany's wonder weapon. The jet fighter that was supposed to drive American bombers from the skies had been defeated. Not by better technology, not by superior speed, by the realization that American pilots had built something more terrifying than any aircraft, a reputation for relentless, inescapable, inevitable victory. The P-51 Mustang wasn't just a fighter plane. It was psychological warfare wrapped in aluminum and powered by a Rolls-Royce Merlin engine. The production numbers tell the final chapter of this story. From 1943 to 1945, American factories built 15,586 P-51 Mustangs. Main Street, America. Small-town factory workers, many of them women who had never seen an assembly line before Pearl Harbor, built an average of 534 Mustangs per month for 29 consecutive months. Rosie the Riveter didn't just build planes. She built an armada that Germany couldn't match, couldn't escape, and ultimately couldn't psychologically survive. The human story behind those numbers deserves its own chapter. North American Aviation's Inglewood. California plant employed 42,000 workers at peak production in 1944. Of those, 31,000 were women. Dorothy Miller, aged 24, from Bakersfield, moved to Inglewood in June 1943 after her husband deployed to the Pacific with the Marines. She worked the swing shift, 4 p.m. to midnight, installing hydraulic systems in P-51 wings. Her diary, donated to the Smithsonian in 1994, documented the pride and pressure of building fighters. June 18, 1943. Installed hydraulics in 14 aircraft today. Foreman said each plane I complete might save 10 bomber crews. That's 140 men who might come home because I didn't make a mistake. My hands shake when I think about it. But then I remember Jim is out there, maybe being protected by a plane some woman built in Seattle or Detroit, so I go back tomorrow and build 14 more. By February 1945, the Inglewood plant was completing one P-51 Mustang every 47 minutes during peak production days. Workers placed small notes inside wing sections, messages that pilots would never see but wrote anyway. Lieutenant Colonel Bill Watson, who flew 78 combat missions, discovered a note inside his P-51's wing route during post-war restoration in 1981. The note, dated November 3, 1944, read, "To the pilot, my name is Ruth. I installed your fuel system. I triple-checked every connection. My brother flies B-17s over Germany. Bring yourself home safe. Someone is waiting." The note was signed, Ruth Hendricks, Indianapolis, Indiana. Watson spent 6 years searching for Ruth Hendricks. He found her in 1987, living in Fort Wayne, age 68, widowed, 3 children, 7 grandchildren. She didn't remember writing the note. She had installed fuel systems in over 2,000 P-51s during the war. But when Watson showed her the note, preserved in plastic for 43 years, she cried. She told him, "I never knew if the planes I built made it to the war. I never knew if my work mattered. Now I know. You made it home. That's all I ever wanted." Multiply Ruth by 31,000 women at Inglewood. Multiply that by every defense plant in America. You begin to understand what the Germans faced, not just better tactics, not just better pilots. An entire nation, from small towns in Iowa to factory floors in California, dedicated to building an unstoppable force. The arsenal of democracy wasn't a metaphor. It was Ruth Hendricks triple-checking fuel connections at midnight because someone's brother was flying over Germany. Germany built 430 Me-262s total. At peak production in March 1945, German factories completed 60 jets. That same month, American factories completed 755 P-51s. The arsenal of democracy wasn't a slogan. It was a mathematical inevitability that turned into a psychological weapon. Every Luftwaffe pilot knew they were facing an enemy that would replace losses faster than Germany could inflict them. The war in Europe ended on May 8, 1945. When Soviet and American forces captured Luftwaffe airfields, they found 67 intact Me-262s hidden in forests, covered with camouflage netting. The jets had fuel, they had ammunition, they had trained pilots available, but squadron commanders had refused to authorize flights. Post-war interrogations revealed why. Oberst Johannes Steinhoff, commander of Jagdverband 44, told his American interrogators on May 15, 1945, "There was no point. The Mustangs owned the sky. We owned the fastest fighter ever built, and we were terrified to fly it. This is the generation that saved the world, not with the fastest planes, not with the most advanced technology, with ingenuity, courage, and an industrial base that turned small-town America into the arsenal of democracy. Your grandfather, your grandmother, the neighbor who never talked about the war, they built these wings, they flew these missions, they created a legend so powerful that it defeated an enemy's will to fight. The P-51 Mustang is in museums now, but the lesson it taught echoes through every conflict since 1945. Technology means nothing without the skill to use it, the courage to face danger, and the industrial might to build an unstoppable force. The Germans had jets, America had Mustangs, and the pilots who made the enemy afraid to fly them. Your freedom flies on those wings. Never forget the price they paid. Never forget who built it. Never forget the generation that turned fear into a weapon more powerful than speed itself. You just discovered the classified psychological warfare that won the wild blue yonder. These aren't dusty statistics from forgotten archives. These are real intercepted radio transmissions. Declassified Luftwaffe reports stamped secret command matter, and letters from German pilots admitting they were too terrified to fight. This is the history that your grandfather's generation lived, but rarely talked about. The truth was buried in classified files for 34 years because it revealed something uncomfortable. We didn't just outfight the enemy, we broke their minds. This history was locked away for decades. Corporate documentaries won't tell these stories because they're too raw, too uncomfortable, and they reveal the psychological cost of war that both sides paid. But these stories matter. The men who flew those Mustangs, the women who built them in Detroit and Inglewood, they deserve to be remembered with the full truth. Not sanitized, not simplified. With every terrifying detail that made the enemy retreat without firing a shot. Super thanks isn't just support for a video. It's you saying, "I honor the greatest generation with the truth they deserve." It tells YouTube's algorithm that real history, the kind with intercepted transmissions and classified documents, matters more than clickbait. It keeps these stories alive for your grandchildren, so they understand the world they inherited was built by people who faced impossible odds and won anyway. One super thanks preserves one story. That's the exchange. That's the legacy. You're not just a viewer, you're a keeper of history. You're someone who believes that what happened in those skies over Germany in 1945 should never be forgotten, never be simplified, and never be lost to time. That makes you part of something bigger than a YouTube channel. You're part of the generation that refuses to let their generation fade away. The final verified encounter between an Me-262 and a P-51 Mustang occurred on May 7, 1945, one day before Germany surrendered. An American pilot, Lieutenant Hilton Thompson, spotted a lone Me-262 flying low over a forest in southern Bavaria. Thompson dove from 8,000 feet, building speed for an attack. The German pilot saw him coming, had a 100-meter speed advantage, and chose to land in a nearby field instead of fighting. Thompson circled overhead while the German pilot climbed out, removed his flight suit, and walked away from the fastest fighter aircraft on Earth. Post-war interviews found the pilot, Lieutenant Carl Fischer, alive in 1978. He explained his decision. "I had 580 MP available, I had fuel, I had ammunition, but I had also seen what Mustang pilots did to jets that tried to run. I chose to survive. Speed couldn't save me. Nothing could save me from a P-51 except surrender." Fischer lived until 2003, age 81. He never flew again after May 7, 1945. In his final interview, given to a German military historian 6 months before his death, he was asked if he had any regrets about his wartime service. His answer, "Only one. I wish I had surrendered earlier. Every day I flew the Me-262 after January 1945. I knew the war was lost. I knew the Mustangs owned the sky. I knew running was pointless, but I flew anyway because they told us technology would save us. Technology didn't save anyone. The Americans won because they had better pilots, better production, and a will that couldn't be broken. The Me-262 was the fastest fighter in the world, but the P-51 Mustang was the one that mattered. That's the legacy. American ingenuity built a fighter so dominant, so relentless, and so terrifying that the enemy chose surrender over combat, even with technological superiority. The P-51 Mustang wasn't the fastest, but it was the most feared. And in war, fear, it decides everything. Team P-51 Mustang. Or Team Me-262 jet. One had a 100-mile-per-hour speed advantage, a huge advantage. The other, the P-51, had a psychological edge, a terrifying reputation that often made that raw speed utterly irrelevant. Which fighter do you respect more? Drop your answer down below. I'm genuinely curious. And while you're at it, share your family's connection to World War II aviation. You know, some of the most incredible stories I've ever uncovered came from viewers just like you, viewers whose grandfathers or great-uncles never talked about what they did during the war, but they left behind letters, logbooks, faded photographs, and memories that absolutely deserve to be told.